Let me say a few words about election or voter fraud, which is something of a concern to you. We looked into a number of cases of alleged organized voter fraud when I was commissioner. The complaints were found to be without substance and no charges were pursued. And I put out a press release on 2 of these, and another one was looked into by a company called Navigant. A few cases of individual illegal voting were prosecuted, but in my opinion, while administrative errors were found, significant voting fraud was not taking place. I came into the job as an outsider, and what struck me as interesting was the ethics that are at work in the electoral process. Of the 60% of people that vote, they're very serious about it. They're very concerned for it, and they support the system and the process enormously. That was my first observation. And similarly, the people at Elections Canada were impressed by the role that they were performing, from the most senior to the most junior person. It begins with a fair election and a reliable result. That's the beginning of the democratic process. That's my little speech for today.
Super. Mr. Corbett, I could listen to you all night, but I know the members want to ask questions, so we're going to let them do that. 7-minute round. Mr. Lukiski, you're starting.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Corbett, for being here. Good to see you again. We'd seen you before this committee. I, like my colleague, Mr. Reid, have been on this committee for, it seems, an eternity, but only, I guess, for the last 8 years. I do have a question about one of your former investigations. Now, may I ask, sir, since this investigation I'm going to be referring to has been completed, are you able to talk about completed investigations?
I'd rather not reconducting the investigation or a prosecution, mind you, but...
Well, there's no charges laid here, but I'm just curious. I mean, it's always been something I've been extremely curious about. Now that I have the opportunity to be with you in the same room, I'd just like to get some information to satisfy my curiosity. It refers back, I hope you can remember, a case revolving a former Conservative member of Parliament by the name of Jeremy Harrison. And in the 2006 election, Jeremy Harrison was running in the far north Saskatchewan, well, it's the Meadow Lake, I think, riding provincially, but it was the Desnethe, Missinippi, riding federally.
Missinippi, yeah.
Right. Now, at the time, during that federal election, of course, Jeremy was the incumbent, and we were listening to the poll results come in, and at the end of the evening, by the time I went to bed, the media had declared Jeremy the winner, because he was up by a few hundred or perhaps even several hundred votes. His main opponent was a Liberal candidate by the name of Gary Morasti. Gary was a fairly well-known First Nations individual, former chief of one of the bands up in the northern Saskatchewan area. Well, what happened, there was only one poll left to report. Jeremy was up by, as I say, a number of votes, a few hundred votes, declared the winner. I went to bed thinking that he was re-elected. I woke up in the morning and all of a sudden I find out that Gary Morasti had won. The circumstances were such that the last poll to report from a very northern riding on a First Nation reserve came in 3.5 hours late, after they had obviously known all of the vote count up until that point in time. And where the ballots were counted 3.5 hours later, they found an amazing thing, that number one, over 100% of the eligible voters in that First Nations reserve voted. I think it was about 103 to 105% voter turnout, and every single ballot cast was in favor of Mr. Morasti. Of course, Mr. Harrison thought this was highly unusual, as do I still to this day. I think most reasonable Canadians would think there was something fishy going on there. Probably, if you were to be making a haphazard guess as to if there was voter fraud, perhaps someone wanted Mr. Morasti to win, waited to find out what they needed to win in terms of votes, stuffed the ballot box, submitted it, and ergo, presto changeo, Mr. Morasti wins. You conducted, or at least your office, I believe, conducted that investigation, and the report that we got back, I think it was from the Chief Electoral Officer, Mr. Corbett, it might have been from you, but I think it was the Elections Canada reported back saying, we found no evidence of wrongdoing, and in fact, we thought that this was in effect almost a good thing, because we are trying to encourage First Nations participation in elections, so having 103% turnout is a good thing. Why is there more than 100%? Well, we really couldn't enumerate. We didn't know how many people actually lived on the reserve, so to say there was 103% turnout is perhaps not accurate. And then to the point that every single ballot cast was in favor of the Liberal candidate. Well, again, we didn't find anything unusual there, at least nothing to warrant recommending to the DPP a prosecution or a court case take place, because Mr. Rasti was a well-known First Nations chief, former chief, so therefore it's quite common, it's quite possible that 100% of the people casting ballots voted for him. I just wanted to know, I didn't understand there was much of an investigation there. It, on the surface, would appear to me, and I think most, as I say, reasonable Canadians, that something fishy happened. Can you recall that investigation, sir? And could you shed any light just to satisfy my curiosity that's been bothering me for the last number of years?
We did put out a press release.
I remember that.
I have it in my hand here.
I'm asking you, sir, there's maybe a little
the
insight.
press release is better than my memory. When you talk about more than on the voters list voted, that was in fact the case. The voters list was vastly incomplete with regard to the eligible possible voters in that community. I recall the band people being asked why there was such a unanimous vote for one person, and the band people's response to that, as I recall it, was, well, we told people that they'd get a better deal from the Liberals than the Conservatives if they voted Liberal, and that's what happened. I don't know that that's against the law to call a band meeting and suggest to people how they should vote and which way is in their best interests.
I know why the delay, why the
no,
last...
I don't remember the delay part.
Yeah, it was over 3.5 hours.
Yeah. But there were numerous people vouched for in that election who were not on the list.
Really?
People in that riding, they had no municipal addresses.
Right.
They had post office boxes in the next riding, but they lived there. The people running the polls knew everybody in town. They could have vouched for everybody. People don't have driver's licenses with addresses on them. It was an interesting investigation to review, because I didn't know these places existed, frankly,
right,
until I read that.
Did you raise in your investigation? Did you raise any possibility of voter fraud? Did you consider that as an option?
Well, what kind of voter fraud would you be
stuffing the ballot box?
No, we didn't find that. We didn't find that.
I know you didn't find it.
What we found is a lot of bungling and records that weren't made out properly, if you will, administrative problems with
people. Nothing that in your investigation would cause you to recommend that perhaps the vote should be overturned, or perhaps a new election should take place? No. One thing that surprised me, though, was that the band offered a prize for voters to get the vote out. There was going to be a raffle with a television set. And I thought, well, there's something there. You can't, bribe people to vote. And when we interviewed the band people said, well, you can't get anybody out to do anything around here without a raffle and a prize. It's the way we do things. You want a meeting, you have a raffle and a prize, you get them to your meeting. So let me get this straight. So the band people offered a big screen TV as a prize and encouraged people to vote for one candidate over the other.
No, they didn't encourage people to vote.
Or said that they would probably get a better deal.
Yeah.
Okay. So to me, that's a bit of encouragement.
So how do you get?
I'm not sure.
How do you get the names in the bucket for the draw? Okay. Well, the band office is here and the voting's going there, and you sit in the window with the band list and you watch them as they go in, you circle their names, you cut them out, you stick them in a hat, and you draw a name. And Mrs. So-and-so won the television set and refused to speak to us.
There, in your opinion.
Mr. Lukiski, your time is up, and I have no TVs for you. Mr. Harris, you're up.